I'm Lucy Beresford, and I'm a psychotherapist and broadcaster. So issues around mothers and daughters seems to come up a lot in the consulting room.
Excellent. Well, so big story in this space, upsetting story, very painful story, I suspect, for everybody involved. Ellie Goulding, big pop star, reveals in an interview, I think in The Independent this week, that she hasn't spoken to her mother for a year, and that the last time she spoke to her, she felt that there was a threatening aspect to it. Now, the mother, an NHS worker, mother of four, lives in Coventry, in a quiet cul-de-sac, denies this and says, I can't understand what it is that could possibly have been threatening. And I deny that completely. And that the other members of my family, the other children, are very upset at seeing this all being played out in the unpopular press. So, Lucy, as well as being a psychotherapist, you make that point in your introduction. You've written about this before. How many families are there in the land where mother and daughter have this, A, have this conflict, and B, is there more of it than fathers and sons? And is there a competitive element? What is the basis of often these kinds of fallouts?
I wouldn't say that it happens more with mothers and daughters than fathers and sons, because the same kind of dynamic is happening between those two relationships. What happens is that the parent raises the child grows up, and in a way becomes a rival for the same-sex parent. And the parent.
How do you mean by rival? In what sense?
Well, they
could
go
a mother
out
and daughter be a rival?
Yes, they go out into the world and they live a younger life. They get the chance to do what the parent perhaps has no longer the wherewithal to do. They can't go out dating. They can't go out building a career. They're living their life. I mean, and that is what is meant to happen. The older generation gives way to the younger generation. And in an ideal world, whether it is fathers and sons or mothers and daughters, there will always be that unspoken competitive element, but it can also be handled very elegantly and very authentically, so that both parties don't feel that they are threatened by either side, or that they can navigate those differences, so that you grow up and you become two adults together as opposed to a sort of parent-child relationship. It's where there is some kind of unspoken conflict, unspoken envy perhaps, or just some unspoken resentment that the child is now going off and making their own way in the world, which is meant to happen. You know, parents are meant to kind of do themselves out of a job in an ideal world, but it doesn't always happen that easily, that cleanly. And I think in particular, if you've got someone, maybe if your child becomes very famous, and maybe becomes very famous at a very young age, and your role as a parent is kind of taken away from you at a very early age, that can stir up quite big resentments that almost can't be articulated. And I think what the story that you're addressing and talking about today, the reason why it's so powerful is because so many families will recognize that tension between the generations for things that have gone on for ages, for decades, the things that weren't said, the slights, the perceived slights. And unless you go right back to the very beginning, you're probably never going to completely resolve it. And what I picked up from Ellie Goulding's comment about, I've had lots of therapy, but it's not really a fixable relationship, is some recognition that this has been going on for a very long time.
So if she says it's not fixable, but lots of families go in and out of love in that way, right? There's lots of tensions, and probably more tensions today than ever. So you, Lucy, a professional woman in this space, you sit down with who? The mother or the daughter? Do you sit down with them together? And what would you want them to say, and what would you want them to hear?
So I would be working with the person who believes that they need to address this problem, because there are sometimes situations where somebody says, well, I don't think there's a problem. I don't see why I should talk. So almost by definition, the person who comes to me is the person who wants to address it in some way. Now, either they want to fix it so that it goes back to being a relationship where they can communicate regularly or see each other at social functions, or maybe they want to make peace with this but draw a line under it. So what I would be trying to explore with...
What do you mean, don't resolve it? You mean don't resolve it, but do end it as something that ticks away in your mind?
To make peace with the fact that either your parent or your child will never be able to be the person you want them to be. Because we're not really on this planet to fix each other according to our own template. We can't just decide that that parent or that child isn't behaving how we want them to behave, and they must be brought to reason and they must be fixed by me. That's just not how it works. So for a lot of children, for example, and I'm talking about adult children now, they come to me and they have to start to come to terms with the fact that their parent may never change. Their parent may have died. Their parent may be senile, or their parent may be living a different life. And the child has to come to terms with the fact that mummy or daddy will never be the person that I wanted to be. In a way, they have to let go of the hope that mummy or daddy can change. But it can happen the other way around as well. A lot of parents are frustrated that their children don't love them in the way that they want to be loved, or that they never hear from them. And they want to try and fix that. And in essence, they have to learn to live with their own life, not with necessarily that other person in it. So it can be quite complicated.
Do you find, if you looked at your patient base or your client base, is this a subject matter, whether it's mother and daughter or father and son, or just that general issue about, children not loving you as much as you'd like them to do, or you feeling that way towards them, by the way? Is that more of your work now, or has it grown? I get the impression that most families you speak to, there is a problem in one of their relationships at least.
It's all the work. It always goes back to that, and always has done. Now, really? Now you're speaking to. I'm a Freudian, kind of post-Freudian therapist, so a lot of my work is founded on the basis that your relationships in your childhood are going to be those key relationships which will have influenced the person that you are now. I think the difference is that we're talking about it more. There was an era where we couldn't really say that our parents were wrong. Children were seen and not heard, and parents were all powerful. And it's only really been in the last generation or two that we've allowed people to say, I've been very hurt by my parents. I feel very let down, very disappointed. Why did my father never come to see me on sports day? Why did my mother never want me to win a prize at school? Why did my parents never want me to go, on that holiday when I was in my teens? There are so many moments where children feel misunderstood, and parents feel let down too, but it's usually the other way around.
I sometimes feel that the words mental health issues are now have actually dwarfed the idea of personality, right? Every single issue, somebody says, "Oh, we've got mental health issues. We've got mental health issues for
everyone has mental health issues.
For not doing any work for 6 months. Oh, really? Got mental health issues about that?
Well, there are some people who do really struggle with their mental health.
I totally agree. Some people do, Lucy. Some people do, but it's now like a catch-all. In which you can say, I tell you what, were it not for lockdown, this is not possible. But actually, normally, I can take 2 weeks off work. Do you sometimes think that the thing has got completely out of control? Or not?
I don't think it's got out of control. I think it's far better that we're paying attention to some of the mental distress that is going around, and not just during the pandemic, but before that. It's very important that people feel heard and that people feel listened to. And if I had £1 for every patient who said to me in the consulting room, I've been feeling like this since I was 12, and I wish somebody had taken me seriously, I would be able to retire. What I
Well,
think
hold on a
is
second,
more,
Lucy. You are being paid £1 for every. You're getting paid 80 quid for every
I'm
time.
being paid exactly. But I tell you what is more interesting, and this is where I think therapy kind of gets misunderstood, is it's all very well for me to say to you, 100% of my patients, in effect, come to me and talk to me about their parents or their siblings at that early life. The difference is that we are not here to parent bash. It is not about blaming your parents or your siblings or that headmistress or whatever it was at school, and then just thinking that that gives you a get out of jail free pass for everything that happens in your life. You understand it, but you then move on from it. It explains what has happened to you. It explains why you might have crippling low self-esteem or periods of depression or social anxiety. It explains it, but it doesn't excuse you from getting on with the rest of your life and saying, you know what, I am worth more than this. And I look at someone like Ellie Goulding, who feels to me like somebody who's really said to herself, I'm going to make the most out of life. I've got a voice, I've got a talent writing. I am really going to live my best life. I'm not going to care what happened to me when I was a child. And that I find very inspiring. What I don't subscribe to is this idea that you go into therapy, you find out that it's all your mother's fault or your father's fault, and you basically sit around just saying, oh, well, I'm blaming my parents. This is not about blaming the parents, but it is about recognizing where you come from, what has led you to be the person that you are, and what you can do to take personal responsibility for turning your life around.
Brilliant, Lucy. That was fantastic. What a tremendous explanation. Lovely to see you, and I hope to see you again. Thank you very much indeed. That was Lucy Beresford. Thank you.